This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Are you ready to reclaim your power and release the hero inside? Christian de la Huerta, his new book, Awakening the Soul of Power, rethinks heroism and reveals tools to embark on your journey to personal freedom. Hi, Christian.
Hey, Lucy. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you. I hope I got your last name right.
You did it beautifully.
Okay, good.
Just rolled off your tongue.
I was a little nervous. So you've had quite the journey full of challenges and learning experiences that sort of brought you to this point of writing this book. Maybe you can share a little bit about how you got here.
Yeah, I write that I'm an unlikely person to be talking about what it means to live heroically and about personal empowerment, because I come from the opposite of that. Like, my adolescence was one long depression. I know self-doubt, I know self-hatred. And these days, because of the teachings that I write about, I never, no matter what happens in my life, a relationship works out or it doesn't, a project succeeds or it quote unquote fails, I never, ever question my sense of self, my self-worth. So I know these teachings work.
And that's a hurdle that I think most of us have to get over. And it starts in your teens, and that's understanding your self-worth. Because that's when we start that game of comparing and who's got this, who's got that. And I mean, for me, that was certainly before social media. So I'm not sure, how that's impacting the youth today.
I think they're probably more fragile because they have such immediate feedback, and online bullying. It's the anonymity of it is makes it, I think, more spread. And it's also because of social media, that these impossible standards of beauty and photoshopped images on Instagram, and I think they just add a whole other layer of pressure. But you're right. I think self-esteem, self-worth, self-love, it all stems from there. If we want to have relationships that have a chance of working, if we want to have a sense of personal empowerment, it all begins with self-acceptance and self-love.
And I find for a lot of people, and speaking for myself in this as well, we're never taught, or not even the subject of self-love comes up growing up. It's usually, somebody hits a crisis point, they hit the, a low point, and that's when they start to discover and uncover who they really are. It's just not, where does it typically come into people's lives about understanding self-worth and self-love?
Yeah, I think with more understanding of the effects of parenting, I think recent generations of parents are being better about that, right? So creating environments in which kids grow up feeling that sense of self-love. I think there's some belief that like the boomers went too far to the extreme, right? So creating too permissive and too much affirmation, so resulting in self-entitled kids. But the opposite is certainly the worst thing. Like growing up doubting who we are, which I think most humans do. And our parents did the best that they could, right? Given what they had to work with, given the way they were raised and their parents before them, they did the best that they could. And in some cases, they caused a lot of harm in that area of how we felt about ourselves. And even if they did a good job, it's like life had a way, right, of just providing unexpected situations and curveballs and peer pressure, and kids, can be cruel to each other. So surviving all of that is a challenge.
So is that what inspired, because your book, it's actually the first of three, isn't it?
Yes.
Is that what was sort of the inspiration behind writing this series?
You know, a couple of things triggered it. One, the book about empowerment, and specifically, I think my older sister inspired it in some ways, because when we were growing up, I'm one of 9 kids, come from a very Catholic environment, and I was raised in Cuba. I lived there for the first 10 years of my life. I realized that I didn't really answer your first question. And my sister was like a natural born leader. Like all of us siblings just followed her naturally. And not only that, but she led and sometimes bossed around not only all of us, but the entire neighborhood of like 15, 20 kids. And she'd say, let's go do that. And we said, yeah, great, let's all do that. When she hit puberty, something happened. I don't know if somebody said something to her directly, or she just absorbed it through osmosis from the culture. But she somehow took this belief that women didn't behave in those ways, that women had to behave in other ways, and she stuffed it. Right? She stuffed all that natural leadership and personal power, and she just swallowed it and took on this persona. And so that always kind of stuck like it always hurt me that because that's not an exclusive experience with my sister. We know a lot of women go through that. And so the truth is we all struggle with power, right? With our relationship to power. We have an ambivalent relationship to it. We want it, but we're afraid of it. And I think at the core of that fear is that we might abuse it and that we might cause harm with it. And no wonder, all we got to do is turn on the news on any given day and witness at least one abuse of power, and sometimes more. And then on top of that, we were conditioned. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. What they didn't tell us is that quote was specifically speaking about political power, not interpersonal power. Add to the mix the fact that we hate confrontation and we run away from conflict, and we've been conditioned as well that the emotions are weakness. And what happens is that we end up giving our power away, right? We end up settling for less. We end up settling for an illusion of security. We end up settling for false sense of acceptance and for morsels of pseudo love. And it's not a strategy that I find works. Ultimately, it doesn't get us what we want, because it's not authentic. We're not being an authentic expression of who we are.
And that relationship to power is a whole section in your book where you look at, different types of power and how we relate to them. And, you know, it's funny because everybody sort of strives for some sort of level of power, but it's with it, as you mentioned, there's certain negative aspects to power. So it's a bit of a fine line of how you balance what it is that you want with what it may make you be.
Right. And that's exactly the message of the book, that there is a way that we can express our power and own it and live from that place that is a match, that is congruent with who we are, like with the good people that we are intrinsically at heart. And so that there are ways of expressing power that don't require for us to abuse it, and that will not corrupt us, and that don't have to be, this hierarchical power over expression of power that's based on fear or force or abuse or manipulation, right? That doesn't require for us to push anybody down, step on them, put our knee to their neck, perhaps, in order for us to feel powerful. That there is a way to do this that is like a natural match for who we are, and that is more like power with rather than power over.
And it goes to that, the old term was, it's a win-win relationship. It's a win-win situation. And for the life of me, I cannot remember what's the more sort of modern use of, a mutually beneficial relationship. But I mean, that's when it comes to power, it's not necessarily having power over somebody. It's acknowledging what you're bringing, those unique gifts. Because I think once we understand how unique and how special each of us are and what we're bringing to the table, then that can sort of, disintegrate any of those fears of not being enough, comparing yourself to each other, because you realize, hey, I have this unique skill and you have that one. How can we work together? What can
Exactly.
we do to create something special for everybody? And I'm seeing it more and more. Um, success through collaboration, not competition, is really sort of where I see things, slowly going towards. And in your book, that's when you sort of get into soulful power.
Yes. Yeah, that's a beautiful way to frame it, Lucy. And so, yeah, I talk about different kinds of power. So worldly power, the way that the world thinks of power, is based on externals, right? So we think of people who are powerful, those who have money, who are famous, who are high up in some kind of hierarchy, whether it's a corporate ladder or any kind of institution. Those things, those kinds of power are all outside of us. So they're fickle, right? Could be here today, gone tomorrow. The other kind of power that I call soulful power or spiritual power, it's inside each one of us. No one can give it to us. No one can take it away. We are the only ones who can give it away. And it's like you were talking about before, worldly power, which I also called ego power, because it comes from that part of us that's that competitive, defensive, takes everything personally, manipulative, always comparing itself to in favorable or unfavorable ways to others, defensive. So that kind of power, the belief is that there's zero sum, right? Like your having power takes away from mine because there's a limited amount of it. That's an assumption, right? Why should your power take away from mine? If I'm based in my power, if I'm established in who I am and I know who I am, then I can celebrate you being in your power, and any difference of opinion, even conflict, we can navigate it. Having a conversation. Your power does not take away from mine. I know who I am and I can handle any situation that comes my way.
And
Um,
yeah, I was going to say that sort of power struggle comes from that scarcity mindset,
exactly.
where there's, there people think that there's a limited amount of something and therefore you have to compete over it. And
Exactly.
when we realize that, we all have something special and different, and that my power doesn't mean that it's diminishing your power.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be, do you find that people are ready to accept that, or they're just sort of starting to step into that mindset?
I think power is up for us to look at, right? As a culture and as a world, um, at least in this country, in the U.S. where I live. Um, that's especially since the last election, and even last year, with the "I can't breathe," and the racial strife. It's about power, and it's about a group of people feeling threatened by other people, and by the nature of the country and who gets to belong and who gets to decide what happens and what kind of leadership do we want. And that part of it is we see all over the world, like that question of what kind of leadership do we want. There's certain countries in which are leaning more towards a hierarchical, dictatorial, authoritarian regime. In times of dramatic social change, a certain number of people want that extra structure. They want to be, boxed in and told what to do and what's right and what's wrong. At the same time, that in other parts of the world, and I would hope the majority of us are beginning to move in the direction of, like you were talking about, openness and collaboration, instead of competition, and like acceptance and equality of all of us, and equal opportunity. So at least in this country, like the very ideals for which we stand are being challenged, and we're having to decide, are we really who we say we are? And I think that's really happening in the whole world. Like Like we're being forced to decide who are we and what are we about.
And I definitely think that, for good or for bad, COVID has put a big spotlight
Yeah.
on that, on how we want to be treated as human beings.
Yeah.
Going back to your point on, that the negative aspect of power, do you think that people are seeking that controlling power because they have that underlying fear of I'm not enough?
Yes. I think there's a definite connection to that. Yeah. I think there's the fear of I'm not enough, or there isn't enough. And so, and it all comes from understanding what the ego mind is, and how that drives us, and how we get stuck in its self-made prison of fear and limitation. Um, and part of it is that, right? It comes from a very wounded place, so it has to overcompensate for not feeling good enough and have to prove. That's at the root of those of us who have or have had perfectionistic tendencies. We're really overcompensating for not feeling good enough deep down inside, so we have to prove to ourselves and prove to the world that we are good enough, and that's a insatiable. I mean, there's no amount of worldly success that will ever be enough to appease that.
Yeah, and I've been on both sides of it. I've been, definitely in the side of the fence where I didn't think I was enough. I didn't think I was worthy. And I did see things, everything in a situation of, if I win, you lose. If you lose, I
Right.
win. That's just how I saw things. And it wasn't until, a crisis point where I created a master shift that I can now look back and see how broken that thought pattern is. But you
Yes,
don't see it until you don't see it while you're in it.
exactly.
Like I just thought that the world was happening to me. I was a victim, all these problems. It's not until you're able to remove yourself from that that you can actually start to move forward. And that's where some of those, I always like to refer to baby steps. You have to start somewhere. For a lot of people, ripping the band-aid off and jumping in full force just doesn't work. It doesn't stick because, getting out of your comfort zone for a lot of people has to be a progress. It's a journey of baby steps. So, when you sort of look at your soulful powers, you talk about forgiveness, gratitude, belief, vulnerability. Is there, if you could pick one of those soulful powers for somebody to take their first baby steps with, which
Hmm.
one would you pick?
Yeah, that's a hard question. It's a really hard question. Well, I think presence, self-awareness is one that I think that's a beginning point. So any kind, because otherwise we're just coming from habits and from subconscious patterns, and we're reacting from old wounds and unresolved traumas in our pasts. So the more any practice that we can do to bring ourselves present, to deepen our understanding of who we are, is going to make a difference. Forgiveness is a huge one. um, because if we're on a journey towards freedom, if we're on a journey towards empowerment, I don't see a way around that. And this is one of the reasons why the work that I'm talking about is heroic, because sometimes we have to forgive what feels unforgivable. Yet the thing is that as long as we're holding somebody else over the fire for what they did or didn't do, our hand is also getting burnt. And so, like we've heard it before, forgiveness is for us. Um, and yet, how do we do that? Sometimes it feels impossible. And here's the way. I'm just gonna give a a gift to your audience that I learned from a teacher along the way. She said, "Look, think about it this way: forgiveness, 2 syllables. Give for. To forgive is to give for. So you flip them around, and what we're doing when we forgive is we're giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. We're giving them the space to be human, to make mistakes, to make a royal mess of things, to fall short of the mark. Um, because the ego that we were talking about, that part of us it's so self-righteous. And it went to law school. So it appoints itself judge, jury, and prosecutor. And it knows exactly what the other person did that was wrong, what the punishment should be, and sometimes delivers it directly. So what we're doing is getting ourselves off of that part of us that's so self-righteous. And we're just, all it takes is the question mark. It's like, I can't see myself ever doing that, but maybe if I had been raised in their family, in their culture, if who knows what was going on in their brain biochemistry, who knows if there was any substance abuse, who knows about the way they were raised and their parents before them, who knows, right? Like maybe I would have come out the same way or made the same choice. I don't see it, but maybe. And even just extending them that an inch of question mark of maybe is enough to open up the heart so that to make space for understanding and compassion and eventually forgiveness. And by the way, forgiveness is an empowering act. It doesn't mean we're rationalizing anybody's behavior or saying that whatever they did was okay. It's not. It doesn't mean that we have to hang out with them ever. It just means that if we want to be free, we have to find a way to come to that place of freeing ourselves. Otherwise, we stay in prison with them. Nelson Mandela said that, like that if he hadn't found a way to forgive his jailers, that he would still be in prison.
And that's it, is that, when you miss forgiving somebody, you're letting them have real estate in your head rent free. You're letting them occupy their time. They may have completely forgotten about the situation. It may not even registered as being a problem, but it was for you. So you need to find a way to get past it. You don't even have to talk to the other person.
That's it.
For forgiveness. It's sort of a self-reflection, looking at the situation and then letting it go. And,
Yes.
I mentioned before about that I was in the I've been in the two camps. I've been in the side of the fence where, I was that hurt person. I was that wounded person. And I obviously did things to people. I hurt other people, hurt people. So if somebody is going to be carrying resentment towards me because of something that I did back then, that's not who I am today.
Right.
And it's, I always say, when you know better, you do better.
That's right.
So, and I try to look at situations like that when I look back at who I was and any hurt that I caused somebody, that was the person I was then. That's
right.
not who I am today. So you also have to go through forgiving yourself.
Oh my God, Lucy, that's sometimes even more difficult. And we've all been there, right? We've both been on those sides. We've both hurt others, and we've both been hurt by, and we've all been hurt by others. And for some reason, we're harsher with ourselves. We're stricter, and the things that we tell ourselves in our minds about ourselves, we would never say to anybody else. We're so cruel when it comes to ourselves. And so even that is more difficult. We can't get around it. We have to find a way to forgive ourselves. So what you're pointing to, given what we knew at that point in our lives, we did the best that we could.
Yeah. And, society has this sort of consensus about giving people the room to fail and being forgiving when people fail. But it's a little bit useless if we don't practice that with ourselves, because if we see somebody else fail at something, our first response is probably going to encourage them and help them pick themselves back up and move forward and take the next step. But when we see ourselves fail, we beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
And we're sort of being forgiving and letting other people fail, but then we're not being accepting when it happens to ourselves.
Exactly. And then the deeper issue that you're pointing to there is the whole definition of failure. Because if we frame life in a certain way, like if we frame our experiences on our relationships as learning opportunities, then there are no failures. As long as we're learning and becoming better human beings and stronger and realizing who we are, then there are no failures. Yeah, some of it is not going to be fun, and many things are not going to go the way that we wanted to. but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a failure. Like when I talk and teach about conscious relationships, which means that we're using the relationship as a way to speed up our own process of growth and evolution. Because there's some blind spots that we're never going to see in ourselves. But if you want to see it, get in relationship, because we're so brilliant about finding each other's, hurt points and blind spots. So if we do them consciously, even if it doesn't end, if it doesn't last the last time, as long as we're growing, there's no failed relationships.
And that's it, is that each experience that we go through, you take something away and you learn. And I
Yes.
think I like to use an analogy of a puzzle, is that we don't actually know what the picture is until we get to the end. But as we're going along, we're taking all of these pieces, and you may get 5 or 6 pieces put together, and you can see what this little piece looks like. And you still don't have any idea what the entire picture is.
No.
And I think that comes when you breathe your last breath. But that's it, is that we're constantly piecing things together and learning and figuring stuff out. And it's a process, and we have to be graceful and compassionate and caring towards ourselves as we're going through this.
Yes, exactly. And I love that metaphor.
Now, you've actually taken your book and it's now a course, isn't it?
Yes. For the last 30 years, I've been doing weekend retreats and workshops and week-long experiences. I take people on beautiful spiritual adventures, that are sort of half retreat, half vacation, like Machu Picchu and southern France and Egypt and New Mexico and Hawaii. So obviously I haven't been able to do this in the last year. So COVID kind of forced my hand, and what I've known I needed to do for a long time, which was to create virtual programming to make my work more accessible to anybody who's, wherever they are, so they don't have to go anywhere to participate and to benefit from it. COVID forced me to do it. So what I'm loving about it is a couple of things. Like, the retreats are amazing and they're life-changing. And I've seen that if people don't have a practice after, when they go back home, they have a huge expansion over the weekend. They have an amazing experience. And if they're not doing some kind of follow-up, some kind of reading, some kind of spiritual practice, getting some kind of support system or some coaching, it's really easy to forget and to start slipping. And pretty soon the demands of life and the day-to-day start pulling them down. And the old voices of fear and self-doubt start creeping up again. And then they have to come to another retreat. What I'm loving about this year-long concept is, first of all, virtual, so they can do it from wherever they are. Second of all, I get to stretch out the teachings over the course of a year. So deliver them piecemeal, like bite-sized pieces. And here's the key: deliver them with interactivity. So every week they have a reading assignment or some kind of content that's given to them with practices, right? And not a lot of stuff. I know we're all busy and have a lot of stuff on our schedules. So stuff that you can do in 15, 20 minutes. But the practices are designed to apply the teachings to our lives so that we can really integrate them into our lives. And so they don't just stay at the level of, wow, what a great book, right? we actually apply them to our lives, and our lives change and we can get the things that we want. The other thing that I'm loving about this concept is accountability. So they have a coaching call with me every 2 weeks. In the intervening week, the groups are divided into dyads and triads, and they meet. It could be a short meeting, 10 minutes just to check in, as a way to keep accountable. And hey, did you do what you said you were going to do, kind of thing, in a supportive way. Because again, it's so easy to forget. It's so easy to get distracted by life. And then I get to use content from all my retreats. So the first quarter, we focus on understanding the ego mind that you and I have been talking about, on how we break free from its prison of fear and limitation. Second quarter is personal empowerment. Third quarter is conscious relationships. How do we attract and nurture relationships that actually have a chance of working? And and how do we use them as a way to speed up our process of growth and remembering and awakening to who we really are. And then the last quarter is life purpose and leadership, and how do we identify and let go of the ways in which we have been playing small, and limiting what we're here to do for an illusion of security.
That's right, because we stay in our comfort zones
Yes.
because it's nice and safe. Now, is that, can they join that program through your website?
Yes, my website is soulfulpower.com, and I'm not sure when this is going to air, but in May, in May of 2021, I'm going to be launching another group. So this will be a good time to find out more information about it, and they can get on my email list, and we have some nice giveaways when they do that, and then we can send them information, or they can request information about the year long.
Perfect. One last question I have for you. On the front cover, and also the first review in your book, is by Miss Gloria Estevan. Now, how in the heck did you get her to read you? How'd that happen?
You know what, Lucy, I'm still blown away by that. It's a testament, and for your audience to, when they believe in something, or where they get a sense or guidance to do something, to stick with it. So that persistence does pay off. I courted her for 3 years. Like I knew, when I moved back to Florida, I lived in California for 20 years. So when I moved back, and I knew she's famous everywhere. She's an icon everywhere, but she's a local icon. So and a really contributor to society down here in South Florida. And so I knew that she was my most, she was the endorsement that I most wanted, because I knew how many doors her endorsement could open, and which would give me the possibility to reach so many more people. So I read that she was going to be speaking at some event, or honored at some event. I bought a ticket to the gala, and after the end, I made a beeline and introduced myself to her, and she was really humble and really accessible, very friendly. And I told her that, which is true, that before Gloria was Gloria, when it was Miami Sound Machine, they used to play at my high school bands, at our high school dances. And so we laughed about that and talked about that. And then I told her a little about the book and its message about women's empowerment. And so she gave me her manager's card. Of course, his job is to be the guardian, the guard dog. It took me 2 years to get through to him. And I was about to give up. And then I thought, wait a minute, I had this realization. I thought, this book is about empowerment, and it's about what it means to live heroically in the 21st century. And then I thought, well, let me reframe this. How is this going to touch her heart? And I thought, I know that you probably don't think, so I redid my email, and I said to her, I know you probably don't think of yourself this way, but the way that you navigated and recovered from your bus accident has been an inspiration for millions of people all over the world. And then I also had done some research, and I found out that her father had been a counter-revolutionary, so conspired against Castro, trying to liberate Cuba from communism. And so I said, and like my parents had been involved in that process. So I said the sacrifices that our parents made for the sake of a larger cause of freedom, are nothing less than heroic. So we know what that feels like. And then I spoke about her generosity, because I've read that she had been really supportive in helping other Latino and Latina artists make it. So I, commented her, and all of it true, all of it genuine. And I said, won't you help this other fellow Cuban American help reach a broader audience, so that I can have a greater impact in the world? And months passed. I had to go to press, and I said, all right, let me follow up. And I was about to give up, and this little voice said, all right, just one more try. And so I said, hey, Adam, I wrote to the manager one last time, I thought. And I said, all right, I have to go to press, and I'm not stalking you. I just want to make sure that you're getting my emails. And within an hour, he emailed back and said, hey, she's halfway through your book and she's loving it. Can you give us another week? And
wow.
I know.
Just goes to show, we get these messages, call it, whether from God, the universe, however you want to frame it,
Yes.
that a lot of the times we edit ourselves.
Yes.
But that is the perfect example of what happens when you don't edit yourself
Yes.
and you take a chance on yourself.
Yeah.
So that's an amazing story. I love it. I'm going to make sure that in the show notes, there are links of where to buy your book, how to take your course, and how to get in touch with you so that people can follow up with you directly.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Lucy, again, thanks for having me. I know that your willingness to do this reaches a lot of people, and thank you for taking the time and for hosting a show that makes a difference in many lives.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby.